Okay, peace. So for the past few days now, I've been working on this theory right here that I want to share with you. And when I say theory, I don't mean some random thought that I just pulled out the microwave and sprinkled confidence on either. Like I always talk about, patterns. Something that I've been seeing across topics such as politics, race, religion, gender wars, social media, family dynamics, ego, trauma, identity, and public opinions. And the more I sit with this theory, the more I'm starting to realize that a lot of the things that people treat as separate problems may actually be connected to a deeper condition. And I call that condition multiple master syndrome. Now understand what I'm saying, because I'm not presenting this as some finished product that nobody can question. I welcome the questions. I'm presenting it as a theory that I've been developing and pressure testing in real time. And before somebody says I'm only talking about other people only, not at all. My theory also indicts me too. Because every human has to ask, what voice am I obeying that I haven't examined? And the basic idea goes like this. What if I told you that a lot of people aren't confused because they lack intelligence? But what if I told you they're confused because too many conflicting beliefs are pulling on them mentally at once? That's at the heart of my theory. You see, a person can have knowledge, experience, and a deep vocabulary. Hell, a person can even quote books, scriptures, scholars, activists, celebrities, therapists, influencers, and podcasts. But if that person has too many masters inside them, the truth won't guide them. Negotiation will. And that's where all the contradictions begin. Because now the question is no longer, what's true? The question is now, which master am I trying not to offend right now? And that's a different kind of slavery altogether, because it's not physical, it's not obvious, and it's not coming from the outside. Sometimes the plantation has no fence, and sometimes the master lives in your mind. And that's why I call it multiple master syndrome. You see, this theory of mine is partly rooted in the Quran in Surah 39, Ayah 29, where Allah gives the example of a man owned by multiple quarrelsome partners. And then he compared it to a man that's devoted to one master only. And the question is basically, are these two men equal? And the answer is no. Of course they're not. Because you got one man being pulled in different directions by competing authorities. One master wants this. Another master wants that. That master is angry. That master is demanding something else. So that man becomes divided. He has no peace, clarity, or stable direction. I mean, he isn't just working overtime, he's being torn apart mentally in multiple different directions. Now compare that to a man that's devoted to one master. There's order, clarity, and a singular direction. There's no civil war going on inside the command structure. And what hit me is this. What if that parable isn't only theological? What if it's psychological, social, political, and epistemological? Meaning, what if this verse isn't only showing the difference between worshiping many gods and worshiping one God? What if it's also exposing the condition of a mentally divided human being also? I mean, a person whose mind, loyalty, emotions, and decisions are being controlled by competing authorities pulling them in different directions. That's the 3929 condition. That's multiple master syndrome. You see, here's the working definition that I'm working with right now. Multiple master syndrome is the internal fragmentation that happens when a person is controlled by competing loyalties, authorities, fears, and identities, all capable of overriding the truth. Let me repeat that last part. Competing loyalties, all capable of overriding the truth. That part matters. Because I'm not saying having multiple influences is the problem at all. No, that'd be way too shallow. You see, a wise person can learn from many sources. I mean, anybody can learn from scripture, history, your elders, your personal experience, as well as your mistakes. I mean, you can learn from psychology, strategy, science, philosophy, and even people you disagree with. That's not multiple master syndrome at all. That's called discernment. You see, the problem isn't having too many influences. The problem is when those influences become masters over you. That's what I'm talking about. You see, the problem is when they stop being sources of information and start becoming authority figures you're too afraid to question. That's when influence can become bondage over you. I mean, that's when a teacher, your community, politics, race, gender ideology, trauma, ego, social media, and public approval can become a master over you. And once a person has multiple masters over them, they no longer move according to the truth. They start moving according to the pressure that's being applied to them. I mean, there's a huge difference between something influencing you and something having mastery over you. Because that distinction matters. Because somebody will come across this video and say, well, everybody's influenced by something. And they would be correct, but that's not the point I'm making. The issue isn't influence. The issue is when things outside of your control have mastery over you. You see, influence, that can inform you. Something having mastery over you, no, that's commanding you. Influence can add a perspective to your opinion. Whereas mastery, no, that demands outright obedience of you. Influence can say, consider this, whereas mastery will say, submit to this or be condemned. That's the difference I'm talking about. So when I say multiple master syndrome, I'm not talking about a person who studies many things, because I study many things. I'm talking about a person who is ruled by many things. And those two things aren't the same. You see, a sovereign mind can examine many voices without bowing itself to all of them. A person with a captured mind, they can't do that. And they'll hear a voice and will immediately ask, will I be accepted if I disagree with it? That's when you know the master has already entered the room. You see, here's where my theory gets a little deeper. Because I believe deception is how each master enters a person. I mean, nobody's waking up out their sleep saying, you know what? I want 5 conflicting beliefs ripping my brain apart before breakfast. No, that's not how it happens. Multiple masters, they usually enter in through deception. And then they get sold to you as a virtue, loyalty, love, justice, identity, being real, being on code, being for the people, being a good man or a good woman, as being educated, hell, even as being progressive. And that's how deception works. It rarely walks in wearing a villain costume. Sometimes it walks in wearing whatever your ego already respects. And that's the trick. You see, if your ego respects intelligence, it'll show up dressed up as intellectualism. If it's activism, it could show up looking like justice. If it's masculinity, it can show up looking like strength. If it's femininity, it can even show up looking like empowerment. And if your ego respects rebellion, it can show up looking like independence too. You see, that's why discernment matters. Because deception doesn't always go against whatever your value system is. Sometimes deception can hijack whatever your values are. That's how a false master gets in. Now, when it comes to these masters, I think they stack. Because not all masters are evil. Some are primary, some are secondary, and then some are just surface level. And then at the bottom, you will usually find the biggest masters. And those masters include fear, ego, desire, your trauma, your insecurities, your pride, your approval hunger, resentment. Those are all powerful because they operate beneath language. You see, a person may not say, fear is my master, but fear is making all their decisions. They could even say their ego isn't their master, but their ego is choosing all the arguments. They may even say approval isn't my master, but approval is forming all of their opinions before they speak. Keep that in mind. And then you got the secondary masters, which include things like politics, race, gender, family expectations, religion, romantic attachments, community pressure, and class identity. And then last but not least, you got the surface level masters. And those tend to be things like online trends, algorithms, likes, comments, celebrity opinions, viral narratives, podcast culture. Now here's the trap. Most people only argue at the surface level. I mean, people will go all day arguing about politics, gender, race, religion, and social media narratives. But often those aren't the deepest masters. Those are simply just the mask. Because underneath all the political arguments might be fear. All these gender arguments, it might be resentment. The race argument might be insecurity. The religious argument might just be your ego. And then last but not least, the social media argument, that might be your addiction to approval. So, if you only debate the surface, you never touch the master at all. That explains why people today can lose an argument and still keep the belief after losing. Because the belief was never really about evidence at all. It was simply about serving a master. And until that master is exposed, that person will just find another argument to protect it in the meantime. And that's why receipts matter the way that they do. Because multiple master syndrome can survive in vagueness, emotional fog, slogans, words where the definition keeps changing, behind everybody knows, behind you know what I mean, behind stop being difficult. No. Define your terms, show your evidence, explain your standard, and apply it consistently across the board. Because once you do that, that hidden master starts sweating. You see, one thing I came to realize is that a lot of people don't hate receipts because receipts are wrong. People hate receipts because they expose who they're really serving. I mean, if somebody says, I care about the truth, but they only demand evidence when the claim challenges their side, yeah, receipts expose that. If you open your mouth and say you believe in accountability, but accountability disappears when your group is being held responsible, yep, receipts expose that too. You can even open your mouth and say, I'm against oppression, and then turn around and excuse oppression when your side benefits from it. You see, receipts aren't just facts. They like metal detectors. They reveal what a person smuggles into the conversation on the low. And that's why multiple master syndrome need receipts. Because without receipts, my theory just becomes a phrase. With the receipts, yeah, it's starting to look like a diagnostic tool. And since we're talking about diagnosis, let's talk about a couple symptoms then, shall we? With the first one being contradictions. Now, let me clear this up, because not every contradiction means someone has multiple master syndrome. People can be mistaken. People can grow, learn, and refine their views over time. People do it all the time. What I'm talking about is when the contradiction becomes a lifestyle. Now I need to ask what's ruling that person. Because if you can open your mouth and say, think for yourself, and then get angry when someone thinks independently from the group, yeah, that's a contradiction. If you say, question authority, and then treat your favorite ideology like it's a sacred cow that can't be turned into hamburger meat, contradiction. Don't judge people and then turn around and judge everybody who disagrees with you, contradiction. That's like, what's another phrase? Somebody saying words are violence, and then turning around and using words to destroy a person's reputation. Or one of my favorites is how a person can say we need unity, but what they really mean is obedience to whatever their agenda is. All of those things are contradictions. And contradictions, they all have owners. You see, that's one of the laws of this theory of mine. How every repeated contradiction has a master behind it. You find the contradiction, then you ask, who benefits from this contradiction? What fears are protecting this contradiction? What loyalty requires this contradiction to be in place? And last but not least, what identity depends on this contradiction? That's how you chase the master. The second thing has to be the moral shape shifting that people do. You see, that's when a person's morals change depending on who's involved. You see, if their enemy does it, it's evil all of a sudden. But when their side does it, it's complicated. If a stranger does it, they want justice. If their favorite celebrity does it, they want context now. If another group does it, it proves something about the group. But if their group does it, now suddenly we need nuance for it. That's what you call moral shapeshifting. And it happens because the truth isn't the master. Loyalty is. Then the next symptom has got to be the addiction to approval. I call out all the time how some people don't have opinions. They have approval strategies. They say whatever gets them accepted by the room they're in. Because at work, they become one person. On social media, they're another person around family, another person around their political party, another against their religious group. Around women and men, they're another person. And they're not adapting to their environment wisely at all. I mean, they think they're going along to get along, and they often think what they're doing is code switching. They have no shape, no spine, just pouring themselves into whatever container approves of them. Then there's the next symptom, which is identity captivity. That's when your identity stops being descriptive and it becomes a prison guard. You see, race can become a master over you, just like gender, political identity, religious labels, and class identity all can become a master over you. Even your identity rooted in trauma can become a master. And when your identity becomes a master over you, the person is no longer asking, is this true? They're now asking, does this threaten my identity? That's captivity in real form. And then you got the last symptom, which is the emotional commands. This is when their emotions start issuing orders to them. Your anger says attack. Your fear says obey. Your pride says never apologize. Your insecurity says hide. Your envy says destroy. And that person obeys it. And now your emotions are not merely signals anymore. They've become masters over you. And that's dangerous because your emotions are real, but they're not always right either. I mean, just because you feel strongly about something doesn't mean you're seeing it clearly. Your mood isn't a revelation, your trauma isn't a prophet, and your triggers aren't commandments. That needs to be said. Now, let's apply my theory real quick to a couple topics, like politics, for example, which is the easiest place to see multiple masters. You see, people will say, I vote based on policy, and then can't explain what the policies are that they support. They can even open their mouth and say, my party cares about me, but can't show the results of it. How they can say the other side lies, but they excuse the lies that come from their side. Or my favorite, how they'll say we need democracy and then demonize people for voting differently than them. That's multiple master syndrome. And not because politics is automatically bad, not at all. Politics is actually necessary. You see, the problem is when party loyalty becomes a master over you. And when your party becomes your master, the truth is now up for negotiation. Any evidence, that becomes selective. Moral outrage, that's scheduled. People stop asking, is this right? And they start asking, did our side do it? And that's not political awareness. That's basically partisan possession. And it don't matter if it's a blue master or a red master. Same leash, different collar. It even shows up when we talk about race debates also. Because many people in society today are trained to treat racial loyalty as if it's the highest moral authority. So when the truth challenges the group, the truth gets attacked. If accountability challenges the group, accountability gets called betrayal. If independent thought challenges the group, guess what? Independent thought gets called sellout behavior. That's a master. Now, let me be clear when it comes to the race part. Recognizing racism isn't multiple master syndrome. Studying history isn't either. Hell, even going as far as protecting your people from real harm. That's not multiple master syndrome either. The problem is when race becomes a god. The problem is when the truth has to ask race for permission to speak. That's what I'm talking about. You see, the problem is when accountability only applies outward. And another problem is when people can identify white supremacy outside of them, but refuse to identify the corruption, deception, dysfunction, and idolatry that exist among them. That's not liberation. That's selective sight. And selective sight is still blindness with a preferred direction. Even when we go into the topic of gender wars, that's full of competing masters. You see, some people involved in these gender wars are serving bitterness. Some are serving lust. Some are serving validation. Some ideology. some trauma, some resentment. And then they turn around and call it men's issues or women's issues. Absolutely not. Sometimes it's simply just unresolved pain speaking into a podcast microphone. You see, a man can be right about certain criticisms of women and still be wrong in his spirit. Same thing can be said about women. They can be right in certain criticisms and still be wrong in their spirit too. Two truths can coexist. But people who suffer from multiple master syndrome, they hate balance because balance threatens the master. You see, if resentment is your master, fairness can feel like betrayal. If ego is your master, correction can feel like disrespect. If your gender is your race, then the truth becomes sexist whenever it crosses the wrong line with you. That's how the syndrome works. Even when we cross over into the topic of religion also, that's infected by multiple master syndrome. You see, a person can claim that they serve God, but they really serve tradition, scholar worship, family expectations, community reputation, the fear of being ostracized. That's a serious problem because now God becomes the vocabulary, but the master might be something else altogether. You see, that's why people can defend cruelty, ignorance, tribalism, and their ego using religious language. Not because revelation is the problem. Not at all. The problem is those false masters smuggled themselves into the religious space. That's why a person can say God while serving status, truth while serving tradition, obedience while serving fear. That's why having sharp discernment matters. You see, separation between what's truly from God and what's merely human control dressed up in sacred fabric. And then there's social media, which might be the greatest factory of multiple master syndrome we can think of. Because the algorithm trains people to serve reaction. Everything from attention, likes, comments, shares, going viral, even outrage, all become masters. And now the person isn't asking what's true anymore. They're asking what will perform for the people now. And that's a horrible downgrade to make. Because I've seen plenty of people who started out with a real message, but then they slowly became a servant of engagement. They no longer say what needs to be said, they simply say what feeds the machine. And the machine is never full either. That little glowing rectangle starts acting like a pocket pharaoh for some reason, telling you to make bricks, no straw, post again. And people obey it and then call it content creation. Sometimes it's just digital servitude with a ring light. You see, here's the formula that I'm working with when it comes to this. Deception multiplies false masters. False masters fracture your perception. A fractured perception can produce contradictions, and contradictions produce bondage. That's the chain. And the cure for it is perceptual sovereignty. Perceptual sovereignty is when you reclaim the authority to see clearly under God, truth, evidence, and discernment. It means you stop letting every group, trend, trauma, fear, and ideology tell you what reality is. It also means you stop outsourcing what your eyes can clearly see. Because once somebody controls how you perceive reality, you know they don't need to control your body, right? They already control the gate. That's why I always say perception is the first battlefield. Now, when it comes to this, here's how you can test yourself on it to see if it's true. Just simply ask yourself, what can make me go against what's true? Whose approval can silence me? What group can make me excuse evil? That's a master. What fear can make you compromise your principles? What desire can make you disobey God? Now, that's not comfortable work, but it's necessary work at the same time. Because the most dangerous master is often the one that you mistake for yourself. So, that's my theory. Multiple master syndrome. The 3929 condition. The idea that many people aren't simply confused, hypocritical, inconsistent, or emotional. They just might be divided mentally, ruled by competing masters. Where over here you got fear saying one thing, ego saying another, your race saying another, politics, religion, algorithm, your trauma, all saying a completely different thing. Even your desires saying something completely different. And then somewhere under all that noise, the truth is just sitting there like, am I still allowed to speak? Because that's the question. Because if the truth needs permission from your race, your political party, your ego, your trauma, or even your social media audience, then the truth isn't the master over you. Something else is. And that's the dangerous part. So, I'm not presenting this as untouchable. I'm presenting it as a working theory. Pressure test it, challenge it, refine it. Because I truly believe that this explains a lot of the contradictions that people keep treating as unrelated. And maybe one of the deepest forms of bondage isn't merely having a master outside of you. Maybe it's having multiple masters inside you ripping you apart mentally. And that's why I call it multiple master syndrome. I'm your good brother Trip. Let me know if the theory adds up or if it falls apart. Peace.